Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another webinar. Glad to have everybody here. It's a beautiful night for flying in Omaha, so we're a little light on the crowd here. I'm sure it's pretty nice around the country, but we got about 12 people with us tonight, and I'm sure to be joined by more. Tonight's special guest is Marci Katz and her husband Michael, and I'll let Marci introduce herself in just a moment. A couple of ground rules before we start. Right now, I have everybody but Marci and myself on mute. Normally, I don't like to do that, but I just want to point out that often we have background noise or side conversations and so on. So if you would do us the courtesy of muting your own phone before we get started, and then if you want to bring up a question or say anything, then unmute yourself and then chime right in. Just a brief introduction to Marci. I had the pleasure of meeting her at Sun and Fun this year. She bills herself as the organized aviator, the world's first and only professional organization, I can speak tonight, professional organizer with a private pilot license and an airplane. And her goal is to help private pilots get organized so flying is less work and more fun. She's here to talk to us about how we as CFIs can get more organized and pass those skills on to our students. Marci, why don't you take a moment, talk a little bit about yourself, and then we'll transfer the slides over to you.
Okay, actually, if you can go ahead and transfer the slides, I have that on there too. But I just want to say hello, everybody, and I'm glad you found your way here tonight. This is Marci Katz, and I'm really super excited about tonight's topic, which is creating space for organizing skills in flight instruction. And let me just pop up the, can everybody see that screen?
We see a nice palm tree, palm front.
Uh-oh. Do you see the PowerPoint?
Now we see the slideshow. Now we see the PowerPoint.
Okay. Now I'm hearing some background noise. How do I get rid of that?
That's probably me, and I'm going to kill my mic.
Okay, great. So welcome everybody. Again, I want to thank Bob Mader and Jim Niehaus for this opportunity. We did meet at Sun and Fun and had a great conversation. My goal is to give great value tonight in the brief time that we have together. I hope this is the first of many conversations with the National Association of Flight Instructors. And I would like to stay connected, and I'll tell you how we can do that a bit later on. Again, I'm Marci Katz, known as the Organized Aviator, the world's first and only certified professional organizer with a private pilot license and an airplane. Also on this call tonight is my husband, Mike, who will jump in when we get to the Q&A. But let me go ahead and introduce him now. My husband, Mike, has been flying since the age of 14. He's been a flight instructor since 1980, and he's taught several hundred people how to fly. That's his part-time job. He's also an award-winning aerospace design engineer with 38 years experience at the Kennedy Space Center, and he is a professional engineer and also a CFI, both airplane and instrument. And now myself, Marci Katz, I'm the certified professional organizer. I'm getting some background noise here. Hey, sweetie, can you kill these speakers for me, please? So we talked about the certified professional organizer. There are actually about 400 certified by the Board of Certification, and throughout the U.S. and the world, there are about 5,000 professional organizers. I earned my private pilot license in 2005, and I'm also an aircraft owner of a beautiful Turbo T210. And the bottom line is I love to organize, and I also love to fly. Here's my first introduction to the world of general aviation. This was my first date with my husband, Mike. And here we are 14 years later. And, of course, Mike said, show the plane, show the plane. So there we have our airplane parked in Merritt Island, Florida, where we're based. Now, I do believe that life is better when you're organized, and I also believe that being organized makes flying less work and more fun. And, of course, it also makes it safer. I also want you to know that while I'm proud of my credentials and what I've been able to help my clients accomplish over the last 10 years of professional organizing, I wasn't born organized, and I wasn't born knowing how to fly. I had a lot to learn along the way. I didn't come from an organized household, and I didn't come from a family of pilots. But the good news is that organizational skills can be learned, and if I can do it, so can you and so can your students. Now, just to set the stage, I want to tell you a little bit about my theory about general aviation pilots. Compared to career pilots in the military or commercial, or even flight instructors such as yourself, I do believe there's more variation in the learning styles and the personality types, as well as less structure and support that you're provided. Basically, you get your ticket, you get your airplane, and you're on your own. Whereas if you're in commercial aviation or the military, there's a lot of support behind you. And therefore, these two combinations, I feel there's a very unmet need to teach organizing and productivity skills. Now, before I go any further, I just want to say I have a great deal of respect and admiration for flight instructors. It's a little bit intimidating, to tell you the truth, particularly to be on the line with you guys tonight who are the cream of the crop. So I do want to acknowledge your credentials, experience, and wisdom. You already know some of what I'm going to teach tonight. You basically call organizing skills just by different names, such as aeronautical decision-making or crew resource management. So these concepts are all sprinkled in. I'm just offering a little bit of a different perspective, and I am curious also to learn from you guys during the discussion phase. So this is for you if you embrace the NAFI mission of professionalism in flight instruction, and if you're open to a new point of view that may help you better serve your students. So tonight's format, I do come to you in the spirit of partnership and collaboration. I really like to harness the power of the collective mind. Let's put our brains together. So we'll have a brief presentation, and then we'll be followed by questions and discussions. So let me grab a quick sip of water here. So tonight we're going to cover what it means to be organized, why it matters, especially for pilots, and how you can create space for organizing skills in flight instruction. So there are many definitions of organizing, but one of my favorites is actually Winnie the Pooh's. And you could read it here, but organizing is what you do before you do something so that when you do it, it is not all mixed up. So that covers a lot, but let's look a little bit closer beneath the surface at the many dimensions of organizing. And you can think of the physical stuff, such as your personal gear or your checklist or kind of the things you have around the cabin. You can think of organizing your information, be it paper or digital. You can have charts or approach plates or your GPS or your iPad. There's also organization regarding your thoughts, and that's sequencing, staying ahead of the airplane, some of the aeronautical decision-making. And then your habits and your actions. You think of your routines, both pre- and post-flight, and when you're doing things during the flight. There's also time management. You have to wonder, are your students prompt, or do they cancel at the last minute, or do they forget about their lessons entirely? That's all part of organization. And then, of course, goals and planning, whether it's their progress along the ratings that they're looking for, or just even their flight planning. And it's very common, I just want to point out, for people to be more or less organized in different areas of their life, depending on their interest level or their perceived importance and different motivations around that. Now, just like organizing has many dimensions, disorganization has many causes. And you kind of have to be a detective. At least that's what kind of I do with my clients. So it could be a lack of skills. Organizing is not taught at school, and sometimes there's poor modeling at home or at work. It could be due to personal choices. You think of misplaced priorities, or maybe overscheduling, or just adopting habits that don't serve you well. Systemic factors, perhaps there's no system in place, or there's an ineffective system, it's too complicated, impossible to implement, so it just breaks down. There's also learning styles, and I know this is taught in Flight Instructor Academy. Sometimes there's a mismatch between somebody's learning style and the system being used. If you're very visual, for example, sometimes out of sight is out of mind. So that can create organizing challenges. And then information processing deficits, maybe difficulty with decisions. People can be particularly distractible or have kind of memory deficits. Now, there's also physical issues related to mobility, fatigue, vision, maybe medication, cognition, and these can be any age or related to aging. And then I do want to point out, I hope that this doesn't apply to a flight student, but there are neurological-based conditions and mental health issues that will lead to disorganization. And even though as a professional organizer and a flight instructor you can't really diagnose these, you want to be on the lookout for depression, anxiety, things like ADHD, maybe Parkinson's or MS, which could affect a student's ability to be organized. And again, I want to point out that disorganization is not a sign of lack of intelligence. It's simply something else entirely. So why is organization important? Well, it's important especially for pilots. Number one, if you look on the left-hand side, because it increases safety, which is always foremost in our mind. Also efficiency and performance. Organization really facilitates learning and also enjoyment of the flight instruction. It also decreases stress, and stress is super important. It's even part of the OMSAFE checklist. It's very important to eliminate or decrease stress as much as possible, because not only will it decrease your performance, but it really inhibits or shuts the brain down and makes learning much more difficult, if not impossible. Being organized also decreases frustration, mistakes, and, of course, accidents. So how can flight instructors help students improve their organizing skills? And let me grab another sip of water here. So first of all, you can be a role model. For better or for worse, students will imitate you, so you always want to be on the lookout for that. Now, many flight instructors do have excellent organizing skills. It's kind of like an unconscious competence. You just seasoned instructors, that's kind of second nature to you. So if that's the case, sometimes you have to kind of study yourself and observe what you're doing in order to teach it. But modeling it is often something that really helps a student. But you do want to ask yourself, well, how do I show up? Am I modeling positive organizational skills? Number two, just be more aware about the role of organization. You can observe your students, and you can notice their level of organizing skill. Look for clues. So, for example, some specifics. Gosh, do they forget their sunglasses? Do they forget to do their homework? Is their flight bag a mess? Are they dropping their pencil because it's not attached to the clipboard? These are some examples. Some other examples might be if they're using paper charts, they're not folded to the flight path that they're taking, or the approach plates aren't marked correctly. Maybe if they're using electronic database, either GPS or an iPad, they can't find their files quickly, or the checklists aren't handy. So these are kind of some of the things that you might notice that a student is doing. Now, every student is different. They have different levels of skill, just like some have more hand-eye coordination, some have better communication skill, some are more organized than others. Now, I would say that, not to generalize, but you'll probably notice a difference between your students who are, say, engineers, mechanics, or career-oriented pilots than maybe ones that are doctors, lawyers, or those ones that we all love, those entrepreneurs. They have a little bit of different skill. And the third way that you can include, that you can help, is to include teachings about organization in your lessons. So you already do like these 3 phases of lessons where you have your pre-flight orientation and then during the flight in the cockpit and then the post-flight. So we can incorporate organizing teachings in all of those areas. So during the pre-flight, for example, you're not only just teaching skills, but as your magazine even implies, as a flight instructor, you're a mentor. And whether a student is just starting out or working on an advanced rating, you want to expand their horizons both as a pilot and a person. So you really want to hold open that space of possibility for them. So one way to do that during the pre-flight is to help them transition from whatever they're doing before the flight lesson to the flight lesson, to getting centered and being fully present. You want to facilitate their clarity and focus so you can get the lesson off to an organized start. Post-flight evaluation, and I've got some specific questions on the next page, but depending on the student, if they need it, you can discuss some of their organizing challenges, get to the root cause if possible, some of the reasons we explored earlier, and explore solutions with them so that they can become more organized and excel in their flight lessons. Again, when you assign homework, see if they have a study plan. Again, a little bit beyond the realm of what you're tasked with doing, but it's a good clue as to whether they're organized or not, how organized they are with their homework and even their course materials. And then scheduling the next lesson, you can observe their calendaring skills. Most people have pretty good calendaring skills, but not all. So let's take a look at some sample questions you can ask your students either post-flight or even just in a different ground lesson if they have organizing challenges. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how prepared or organized did you feel for today's lesson? And if not a 10, what could you do to make it a 10 for next time? Here's some more general questions. In general, how organized do you consider yourself? And are there some areas of your life where you were more organized than others, and what do you think accounts for that? A lot of times, someone can reach inside of themselves and find the solution. So they know more than they think. You just sometimes need to bring it up. A couple of other questions. How would you rate your organizing skills with respect to aviation, both pre-flight in the cockpit and their study habits? Just sometimes getting somebody to rate their skills will bring attention to it. What way is your current level of organizing skills supporting your goal of becoming a pilot or earning whatever rating? And ask them, in what ways is disorganization holding you back? What specific areas do you feel you need improvement, and what steps will you take to build organizing skills? So this is how you can approach some of these questions with your students and help them develop strategies and habits and routines that will be supportive of their organizing goals. So I'm going to pause here and actually open it up for some ahas, any question and discussion. I'm really interested in specific examples of what you've found with your students and your experience in flight instruction. While you're kind of thinking about that, I'm going to put up my Stay Connected slide so we can stay connected. There's my email address, Marci@organizedaviator.com. There's a free gift opt-in at my website, organizedaviator.com. And if you do want to go ahead and opt in, I'll make sure that I send you a copy of this presentation if you'll find that helpful. So I'm going to leave that up there. And Bob, do you want to open the line and get the discussion?
Well, we're open. And first I want to say that's a great presentation, and we really appreciate it. You started out by saying that you're a bit intimidated, that here you are, a private pilot talking to a bunch of instructors. Well, sometimes a bunch of instructors are intimidated to talk to somebody who knows more than us, particularly in an area that we don't claim to be an expert at. So we're all in this together, as Red Green would like to say.
All right. Well, I'll try breathing. I've already had like 5 glasses of water. So. But it's one of those things where, as I mentioned earlier, it's kind of sprinkled in throughout the training, but not really in a cohesive way.
Well, one of the things, I apologize, but you mentioned that one of the things that I didn't get as a flight instructor or in training, and I know I don't do it, is I don't speak directly towards organization. We talk about putting together lesson plans and the importance of setting up a curriculum and so on, but we never talk specifically about organizing. Now, I'm going to lead off with a question or a thought, and maybe this will trigger some conversation here. One of the issues I have, as being both a very busy person working for a large corporation here in Omaha, many of you who read the magazine can probably figure out who that is, and I instruct, and I'm a busy instructor at the same time. And what I find myself fighting all the time is my students, this really sounds crass, but the only way I can say it, my students seem to think that my time is their time, or their time is my time, or something like that. That I have often I feel like I have no control over my own personal schedule during good weather. There's a part of me that dreads the month of June, I'll be honest with you, because all of a sudden the phone just doesn't stop. And what do you recommend?
Okay, so you're talking about overscheduling yourself.
Oh, well, other people helping me overschedule. Okay, how's that sound?
Right. So there's two issues here that come to my mind. The first is it's a boundary issue. Okay, it's the students don't know how many other students are calling you, and they don't know your busy schedule. So it's not totally their fault. And then it's a matter of you being able to say that big word that we all have problems with, which is no, N-O. So one way of doing it, because we don't like to say no, no, no. So when you take your calendar in the month of June or whatever month it is, decide in advance what is the maximum number of hours you want to flight instruct, or what days you're available to flight instruct. Now, I know the weather comes into play and student schedules comes into play, so there's flexibility, but if you make an appointment with yourself, and then you can move those blocks of time around, but when the blocks are filled, then the answer is, gee, I'm so sorry, I don't have any more availability this week. Can we do it? Does that make any sense?
That makes a lot of sense. And it's a good strategy, because often I find I can't speak for the other instructors here, but often I find myself surprised, I'll put it that way, and wondering when I will ever get to see that movie I rented.
Well, the thing is, it's not just flight instruction, it's really all of life, right? We all have more that we want to do than time to do it. And we make appointments with doctors. We show up to work when we have to, because we have to punch that time card. But we sometimes forget to make appointments with ourselves, right?
That's a great approach. Sounds like somebody else has a question. No, maybe not. Van, I know you're on. You're always good for a question or two.
I'm just listening.
You're just listening tonight. You're just listening tonight. Okay.
Well, thank you for listening. It's a pleasure to be on the line with you.
Anybody else have any questions? And John Haida, it sounds like your mic's open. I just muted you for a moment there. Do you have a question?
I'm right here, but I don't have a question right now. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I just your mic. We were getting a little feedback there, so I thought perhaps you had a question.
Right.
Anybody else have anything?
I have a question, and I'm just curious from the flight instructors if they have noticed disorganization being a problem with their students, or how they've experienced that, if they have experienced that.
I got a comment.
Yes.
Go ahead, Ted.
One of the biggest things that I found was that you had to teach your organizational skills to the instrument students. because they have to be organized enough, they have to be familiar enough with the airplane to stay far enough ahead of the airplane that they can stay ahead of the flight. But in order to stay ahead of the flight, you have to be organized enough to have everything laid out in order so that you can respond to changes as it goes through. And that organizations of skills, I don't think I teach it as specifically that, but I do teach in such a manner that that's a major part of it.
Well, it's interesting you say that because, as a student progresses from, private to instrument, it's an up-leveling of their skill. And it's really no different than somebody starting out, say, in a company job and they don't really have a lot of responsibility, and then they get more responsibility and they have to be more organized and have, more email to process and the same kind of thing. So we talked about, helping someone grow as a person, and sometimes their level of organizing skill will catch up to them, and then that next step, they'll need more. Does that make sense? So I think the rule is to expect your students not to have that kind of skill, particularly if they're not. We talked about different types of students. Some are just super organized; they're role models for everybody, and then others struggle a little more. But it's not a sign of lack of intelligence or lack of ability. It's just that they haven't had that skill catch up with them yet.
That's a great point. Go ahead,
the point I was trying to make is that when you get to that, when you get to an area where you have a higher cockpit workload, if you're flying single pilot IFR with a light twin and no autopilot, you really have to be organized because that's one of the heaviest cockpit workloads you're going to get. And so your training, as we're training people, I don't think we specifically say we're teaching you organization, but we have to be doing that in order for them to gain the skill levels to obtain that ability to fly at at the more advanced ratings and the higher cockpit workloads.
Well, that's exactly right, and I think I said that you teach it, you just might not call it organizing, but that you definitely have to teach it, and it could be if you notice a student is not as sharp in that, then that might be a discussion about their personal minimums. They might, get the rating, but maybe that's something that factors in. Just like some pilots, like crosswinds, and some just, can do them. It's the same thing with handling that higher workload on an instrument flight.
Marci, Ted's question, and that was Ted Sanders. He's on our board of directors. You might have met him at Sun and Fun.
Hi, Ted.
Hi.
Ted's question brings to mind a thought. Would it make sense for CFI, and again, we have to be amateur psychologists. We basically go through fundamentals of instruction, which qualifies us to be. We can't hang anything after our names, but it qualifies us to be a street corner psychologist. You're certainly a professional a professional organizer, but it brings to mind: do we have to take some lessons from you and actually put together a specific class or session with a student, or a couple of sessions, just titled Cockpit Organization? There's certainly been a lot of articles about it. People have talked around it, but maybe it's time for that to be a specific lesson plan, again tailored to the level of the student.
Yeah, I think the time has come to integrate a lot of these different things. Again, in my profession, I study a lot of psychology too. I can't diagnose anything, but certainly, when you put the two together, there's a lot that could be done. You talk about cockpit organization, and I kind of have my kind of five parts of cockpit organization, which is kind of a whole nother presentation, which maybe we could get into it at another time. But the main thing about it that I want to stress is that the solution has to work for the student. And that's where sometimes we try to be good models. We teach them, they imitate us, or they imitate the instructor, and they do like the instructor, but not everything works for everybody. And that's the difference. So.
Yeah, certainly my style doesn't work necessarily for my students. I have students. I'm amazed at how much they write down out of a METAR, for example, where basically, okay, there's the winds, there's the ceiling, I'm happy. There's the altimeter, and we're good. And I use, again, my style is I use the cockpit to organize myself, or the instruments. So finding what works, learning how to teach those skills to somebody who doesn't do it the same way you do, because there's technique versus procedure, is an interesting conundrum. And I guess I'm building up to the question of how do you learn to recognize what's valid for somebody else, which wouldn't work for you at all. How do you recognize a good process versus one that isn't? In other words, I know organization when I see it. I just don't know how to describe it.
Well, so for a student, okay, one of the things is, do they like it? Is it something that's comfortable for them, or does it not really work? And you can kind of look for clues in other areas of their life. There's been a lot of articles, a lot of them tongue-in-cheek, but about, an open flight bag versus the one with all the pockets, and they both work, but there are certain people have strong preferences one to the other. And it's kind of the same with everything else. Some people like knee boards, some people don't. Some people like their iPad stuck up here, some people like it stuck lower. And those type of things, some people like to copy down more detailed clearances and some just, shorthand. Some of that is experience and some of it is preference. So the best way that I found is to ask the student. If you see something not working, try to ask why, or what do they think would work better.
Okay, that's fair.
I think, Bob, one of the things you have to recognize is what works for them may not work for someone else, and you have to analyze and figure out what's working for them. When I was teaching firearms to basic and advanced firearms at the police department, you don't insist that everybody hold the gun the same way. You insist that everybody follows the safety rules, but when they operate within the limitations that they have, and they do what works for them, and you encourage that. You don't try to discourage it. You don't have to do it the way I do. You have to do it the way that is successful.
Ooh,
that's a great point.
Better than myself. That's perfect. Yeah, they have to like it and it has to work. If it doesn't work, it doesn't matter if they like it, right?
That's true. Another thing that flight instructors contend with is I've trained in everything from, and those of you that know me, yes, I do fit in a 152 or a 150. In everything from a 150 to a katana to diamonds to, 210s. And the cockpit organization is really a challenge. Even if I leave all the paper in the post-iPad age in my flight bag, which may not fit in the diamond, may be down to the iPad and the headphone, it's still a struggle sometimes. So any thoughts for a CFI to figure out what strategies work where? I'm talking about physical limitations, for example.
The short answer is it really just depends. It's trial and error. You know enough as a CFI to know if it's working.
Okay.
I would think. And I have to say something about this whole post-paper era. I remember 3 years ago it wasn't 3 years ago, 2009. How many years ago is that?
4.
A lot. We took our airplane from Merritt Island to California. And, oh, my God, did we have approach plates and charts and I had boxes of them, literally, and I had a spreadsheet that told me which ones I needed for which leg, and every leg I'd swap them all out. A couple years later, when we went to Canada, we did it on the iPad, and I have to tell you, it was easier to stay organized with all that physical stuff.
Really?
And it was much harder to, and maybe that was just my facility with the iPad, but it was much harder to find the files. There was glare on the screen. I had to hold it a certain way. The screensaver would shut it down. So, yeah.
What I found with the iPad and all the stuff in the cockpit, I found I'm trading papers for wire. So keeping
right.
the iPad charged.
I'll have to say, I mean, neither my husband or I do a lot of single pilot IFR flying anymore. So, there's always the advantage of a second set of hands that works wonders. So I can't speak to all of your questions, but, if at first you don't succeed, try again.
Fair enough. Anybody have any other thoughts or questions or suggestions or issues that they've faced with students, success stories, or even dismal failures that you'd like to figure out how it could have worked better?
Well, going back to what you're taking in the cockpit, Bob?
Yes, sir.
When I was flying freight under Part 135, we had to have the company manual. We had to have a lot of excess paperwork, so you ended up carrying 2 great big flight bags instead of 1. And what you end up doing is you figure out exactly what you need for that flight, and the rest of it goes in the back seat or the baggage compartment. You have to have it on board, but you only take what you absolutely need for that leg of that flight until you can redo it and restock what you're doing. What you need for the approach plates for past that and any possible alternates that you're going to use. And you put that together. It's basic CRM again, once again, cockpit resource management. And I always told the boss when he was flying along, he was in my desk because everything went on the co-pilot seat.
Well, I mean, you're exactly right, and that's what we did for California. Every leg, I'd look at my spreadsheet, I'd swap out what was in front, plop it in the back, and get the next leg's material. So, yeah.
Well, anybody else have anything? Because we could tell war stories all night, but
well, I wonder if if you've noticed, and again, I don't like to stereotype, but if there's any particular types of students that are, that have certain just characteristics. Like, for example, when I talked about I really feel that if you're not a career pilot, military, commercial, flight instructor type, maybe mechanic engineer, that there is more of that variation, and then without the support that I'm just curious if that theory holds true, if you've seen that.
Well, if we can talk in very broad stereotypes and realize that people are individuals.
Right. I mean, I don't want to, go down any type of road like that, but I guess,
yeah.
Have you noticed that as the variety of students, as their walk of life changes or their career changes, that there's more variation?
I will tell you that I love teaching teachers, at least from an organizational standpoint, and doctors drive me nuts.
Well, it's just like I said, it's not related to intelligence, but I mean, I have a lot of clients that are physicians. Some are very good ER physicians, and they're not very organized when it comes to anything other than being in the ER.
Yeah, and I suspect, if it's especially with an ER physician, I suspect they're so hooked on the chaos or not chaos. That's not the right word. The ebb and flow of what goes on in a busy ER. I think when things settle down, they're not quite sure what to do.
Right. It's that that hyper focus and then on to the next thing. And then it's also having a lot of support. You throw a sponge, someone picks it up.
Yeah. Got a point.
So anyway, are there any other closing comments or ahas or questions?
We've got a pretty diverse group here. I don't want to close it out. Usually we got a pretty good debate going here on these. I think spring fever set in.
Everybody. What you could do is, if anything comes up, because I know sometimes as soon as you hang up, a question pops into your head. You can certainly go ahead and contact me at my email address that's on the screen. Again, if you want to opt in for my free goodie, you can get that too. And I'll go ahead and make sure you get these notes. I do then want to say thank you very much, and I hope we can do this again on another topic if that sounds good, and I'm going to turn this back over to Bob.
Great. And by the way, the free goodie isn't the title of the T210, is it?
No, it's actually like a hangar organizing checklist.
Well, I had to try.
Sorry.
Oh, well. Oh, well. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for... let's try that again. I'd like to thank everybody for participating tonight. I appreciate everybody taking the time out. If it's anything like it is in Omaha where you are tonight, you sacrificed a beautiful evening to spend some time with us, and I really appreciate it. We do look forward to next month's webinar, and in the name of organization, we'll finish up with Rick Todd's series on social media for the flight instructor and flight training organizations. We apologize for last month. Rick was one step away from pneumonia, according to his doctor, so we had to call an audible and cancel out at the last minute, which is something I don't like to do, but we were kind of stuck there. So with that, appreciate it. Please fly safe, fly organized, safer, and I want to thank Marci one more time, and feel free to contact her. And if you have any questions, you can contact me at rmater@nafinet.org. And with that, have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.